Hi, welcome to this webinar from Telerik India. This webinar topic is all about developing ASP.NET MVC applications quicker with Kendo UI. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to be looking at what is Kendo UI, then we're going to look at Kendo UI Web, and then ASP.NET MVC wrapper, and we follow up that with a demo. A little bit of introduction. My name is Lohit GN. I'm a developer evangelist with Telerik. Here's my coordinates, lohit.nagaraj@telerik.com. If you're on Twitter, you can find me at the handle Kashyapa. I blog at my own site, kashyapas.com, also at telerikhelper.net. Now let's take a look at what is Kendo UI all about. Well, Kendo UI is everything you need to build HTML5 and JavaScript applications. Todd Anglin, who's a VP for HTML5 Web and Mobile Tools Division here in Telerik, has this to say. Kendo UI solves an important problem faced by JavaScript and HTML5 developers. It delivers a unified framework backed by professional support. It's easier to learn, easier to upgrade, ultimately making it easier to build apps with HTML5. Now let's go over a couple of things here in this statement. What this talks about is, it's solving an important problem faced by JavaScript and HTML5 developers. There are multiple frameworks, there are multiple libraries, there are multiple plugins, as we call as in the JavaScript world, available to do a lot of things. So basically, as a developer, you will go behind these frameworks or libraries or plugins to put it into your project, and then thus increasing the dependency in your project. Now we talk about delivering a unified framework. The unified framework here, what we are talking about is you just need one package called Kendo, and then it's going to provide everything that you need. For example, if you're talking about MVVM, if you're talking about globalization, if you're talking about validation, so everything is packaged with just one bundle known as Kendo UI, and it's backed by professional support. Telerik is in the industry from last 11 years, and then it's known for one of the best supports that you can get. So that's why we say it's a unified framework which is backed by a professional support. It's easier to learn because the whole of Kendo UI is built on jQuery. So the jQuery is the only dependency that Kendo UI has. So if you're already proficient with jQuery, it's easier to learn the syntax of Kendo UI, and it's easier to upgrade because you already know jQuery. The only thing you need to know is how do you program with Kendo UI controls. So ultimately, it makes it easier for you to build your apps with HTML5. Now, if somebody asks what exactly is Kendo UI all about, Kendo UI is actually three things: Kendo UI Web, Kendo UI Data Viz, and Kendo UI Mobile. Kendo UI Web, as the name says, is the controls or widgets available for web pages. Data Viz is nothing but the charts and graphs available for the browser-based, the web pages or the mobile applications. Kendo UI Mobile is our revolutionary adaptive rendering framework or hybrid mobile application development framework, wherein if you write once and then you can package it on any platform, on the mobile platforms, and then it's going to render according to that particular platform. Now, all these three flavors of Kendo UI are backed by our own Kendo framework elements, so you get it as part of whichever you buy. On top of everything, we also created, and server-side wrappers, as we call it. We have ASP.NET MVC-based wrappers, JSP-based wrappers, and PHP-based wrappers. Meaning, Kendo UI Web, as I said already, is completely JavaScript client-side and then HTML5 and JavaScript-based framework. So you program in JavaScript, but if you don't, you're not proficient with JavaScript and you want to be in the comfortness of your own server-side technology, so we are supporting you in ASP.NET MVC, JSP, and PHP. So we're going to be looking at today in this webinar more on the ASP.NET MVC wrappers. Maybe in future we'll do a one for JSP and PHP. Now, coming back to the core framework elements that Kendo UI has, it's something like this. So we out of the box provide you data source, validation, globalization, templating, MVVM, and drag and drop, and many more things. But in this slide, I've just put this much. Data source is an interesting concept here. It's pretty much similar to what your server-side data technology would be providing in terms of the data source. Like if you are on ASP.NET, you will have SQL data source or object data source. Similarly, in JavaScript, we have this concept of data source where you just configure this data source with the CRUD URLs, meaning what is the URL to read data, what is the URL to create, update, and delete, and rest of the things will be done by the data source itself, meaning you don't have to pretty much write the $.ajax.get or $.ajax.post. So all this mundane HTTP calls will be done by the data source, and it will automatically give you the data that is their underlying data, which comes a part of the call. Similarly, validation, globalization, everything is included in this package. So if you're looking for one package using which you want to do everything, so Kendo UI will provide you everything. Now let's look at some of the characteristics of Kendo UI. The Kendo UI web controls are already ready for touch, meaning full support for the touch screen. If your web page is running on a tablet where it's a touch base, so our controls understand the touch. The drag and drop are also touch enabled. And we also have done Kendo UI keeping in mind the performance. So this is a fast JavaScript performance, performant control. Every aspect is built from the ground up. It's not another jQuery UI clone. It has a lightweight templating library, which is slightly faster than the jQuery templating. And it's also the whole of Kendo UI is optimized for animations. Also, we give you a lot of browser support. We say great UX across devices or browsers. We support IE7 Plus, Firefox, ESR, Safari 4, and then Opera 10 Plus. As I said, one of the framework elements is the support for the MVVM. So we out of the box provide you the MVVM capability. So it has an inbuilt MVVM framework. There's a declarative binding is possible. We allow you the two-way syncs, can be used with other libraries like backbone.js or anything. So basically, if you the modern day web pages have been built using the concept of MVVM, wherein you create a view model and then you bind the view model to the controls, and then there's a two-way data binding happening, there's a two-way sync happening. So everything is possible even with Kendo UI. So you don't need an additional framework or a library or a plugin to do MVVM, but you can do it with the Kendo UI itself. But we also understand that you would like to work with other frameworks which you may have gotten used to. So we do allow, we do work with those libraries or frameworks pretty well. We out of the box give around 7 themes, but you don't like any of our themes, what you can do is you can actually customize these themes. We have a theme builder wherein your style guy or UX guy can come in and then just theme the whole controls to look as per your organization's color schemes. So you can actually customize these themes. So now let's look what exactly is Kendo UI Web. Basically, Kendo UI Web is nothing but the web widgets for the web pages. We call it as widgets, but it's pretty similar to control. So these are nothing but the controls available for building a web page. Kendo UI Web, as the name says, can be used in any of the web page development. These controls are all completely client-side, HTML5 and JavaScript based. As you can see on the slide, we have at the moment 22 controls that we support: autocomplete, calendar, color picker, combo box, date picker, date time picker, drop down list, editor, grid, list view, menu, multi-select, numeric text box, panel bar, slider, splitter, tab strip, time picker, tooltip, preview, upload, and windows. These are the currently available controls. We will, as the time progresses, we will be adding a lot of other controls too. We keep adding at the rate, at an average of at least 1 or 2 controls in every release. So keep lookout for if you're in need of any controls, we may be building it already, and then it may be available in the due course of the time. So how do you use Kendo UI Web? There are two ways in which you can use the Kendo UI Web. So I will be talking about both of them. The first way is to just download the Kendo UI. You have to just configure the page to use the Kendo UI scripts and styles, define your basic HTML, and then initialize the control with JavaScript. So if you can see on this slide in the picture that we have, the step 1 we download the Kendo UI. Step 2 we have added the styles and scripts. Step 3 what we are doing is we are creating on the document.ready we grab hold of a element called menu, and then we convert that into a Kendo menu. So this is as simple as it can get to work with Kendo UI. So as you can see, one of the ways of working with Kendo UI is completely JavaScript. So there are two ways even in the JavaScript, like you can do an attribute based or the pure JavaScript based. The image here in the slide deck is showing an JavaScript based. Let's say you don't not proficient with JavaScript, so you're like, okay, there's too much of JavaScript that I have to do, so is there any other way to use Kendo UI? Yes, this webinar is all about how do you develop quicker ASP.NET MVC based applications using Kendo UI. So in the next section we'll be looking at how you can use Kendo UI ASP.NET MVC wrappers. So just stay tuned for that. So next section we'll be looking at ASP.NET MVC wrappers. So now let's take a look at what exactly is ASP.NET MVC wrappers for Kendo UI. Kendo UI ASP.NET MVC wrapper is nothing but power of JavaScript but the productivity of server. So you can simply program on the server and the Kendo UI wrappers will handle the HTML and JavaScript. Note that these server-side wrappers are not they're not outputting the complete markup of the control, rather they just output the JavaScript that is required or JavaScript that is necessary to create the control on the client side. So in the previous section we saw how we can create a Kendo UI control using pure JavaScript, hash and then grab the element ID and then just say .kendo menu. So there, and you will configure that a lot of configurational values. So if that is not something that you want to do, but rather your comfort is in the C# or Razor syntax, so this is where the MVC wrappers will come into picture. As you can see in the image that we have just put up there, we have a chart MVC wrapper for the Kendo UI. So all you need to do is html.kendo.chart and then say and use predominantly all the properties. You can just set it as a method here, like .name, .title, .legend. But one thing to notice here is everything is a Fluent API, so you're just chaining the calls. It's not writing different lines or different statements in order to create the Kendo MVC wrapper. Rather, it's like you're just chaining all the calls, and then it's pretty much similar to any of the Fluent APIs that you might have used. Example, Entity Framework. So as I said, it's simply be in the comfortness of your C# and Razor, but still you can get the power of the Kendo UI controls. So you just are creating a bunch of lines on the server side, which gets translated into a bunch of lines of JavaScript, which is required to create the Kendo UI controls on the client side. So it's pretty simple, easy, and then power of JavaScript with the productivity of the server. We also support simple server-side data binding and CRUD. It's just like you can define, you can configure the JavaScript data source to work directly with your data. Even for the CRUD operations, you can create the read, the create, the update, the delete URLs, configure them to the data source, and then it's going to just work seamlessly. We do have complete server-side and client-side API, so it's pretty consistent what you get on the client and what you get on the server side. So you just create the server-side wrappers, and then you will be able to work with the control on the client side. It has a rich client-side APIs too. You will have full access to the Kendo UI client-side API, so that you can control. You can have maximum control in the browser itself. The server wrappers just output the Kendo UI JavaScript, not the markup. So that's why it will be faster than the usual way of creating the markup on the server side. The MVC wrappers for Kendo UI themselves, they support the support is from ASP.NET MVC 3 and above. So we have 3 and 4. So we just start supporting from MVC 3. You can use it with any view engine, be it Razor or ASPX. Of course, you can automate the Ajax data binding using our wrappers. We also have Visual Studio helpers for faster configuration. Having known what is Kendo UI and Kendo UI Web and Kendo UI ASP.NET MVC wrappers, let's quickly pay attention to what are we building today. Basically, I'm going to be taking a example to in order to walk you through what is possible using ASP.NET MVC wrappers. So let's quickly take a look at what are we building today. So we will be building an AdventureWorks dashboard. It's a simple dashboard that I'm trying to mimic here. Basically, let's say as an administrator of the AdventureWorks, you wanted to know a couple of things. One is I want to know what are the categories available in the database, and each category has a subcategory. So I want to look at, like, when I select a category, I should see all the products coming up, and then if I drill down to a subcategory, I should see the products belonging to that category and that subcategory. Also, I want to see the top grossers, meaning show me top 5 products in this particular category who have been making more money than any other products in this category. Also, I want to know the top 5 products which have been sold more in numbers. It is not about amount, but rather I say it as top sellers and top grossers. So grossers is basically which product is making more money. As you can see in this example, Mountain 200 Black is made already for $4,400,000 US dollars, whereas Mountain 200 Black 38 has been sold close to 2,500 times. So basically, if you change a category, it will change the subcategory, and then if you click on the subcategory, the grid will change itself, and also as soon as you change a category, the 2 graphs in the bottom will change. So we're going to be looking at how easy it is to create this particular UI using Kendo UI ASP.NET MVC wrappers. So having said that, so this is demo time, so let's see some action. In order to work with Kendo UI ASP.NET MVC wrappers, the easiest way for you to do is to download Kendo UI product from telerik.com and then install it on your machine. Once you have installed, we have Visual Studio extension, which basically provide you the project templates for creating new ASP.NET MVC applications. So on my system, I've already installed our Kendo UI product, and then now when I go to File, New Project, you will see that under you will create a Telerik as one of the installed templates, and then under Telerik Web, you will see like we have C# Kendo UI for MVC web application. We also have VB Kendo UI for MVC web application, meaning if you're programming with Visual Basic as the language, we have it for that, as well as we have the C# one. So what I've done already is, so this is the project template. If you click on that and then say provide a name and then location and then say OK, it will create the MVC ASP.NET MVC application with Kendo UI already integrated. In the interest of the time, what I've done is I've already created the project. So I'm going to just walk you through the project. What's the effect that the project template does? Once you select the project template that I showed and then create the project, this is the first thing that it does. In the references, in the project references, what it does is it goes ahead and then creates Kendo, adds a reference to kendo.mvc.dll. When you install Kendo UI product on your system, we also ship the kendo.mvc.dll along with it. So when you create a new project of the type Kendo C# Kendo UI MVC application, the Kendo UI templates, they know where to pick up this kendo.mvc DLL, and then they add a reference to that. That's the first one. Remember, I talked about Kendo UI is all about the JavaScripts and then the style sheets. So second thing it does is it in the content folder, it creates a new folder called Kendo, and then creates a folder for the build It's basically I'm using the Q1 build, so 2013.1.5 is nothing but the build number. So and then puts all the on the style sheet that is required. Now it's not exactly required for you to copy the whole things. Whatever you see here, like black, blue opal, bootstrap, default, high contrast, metro black, moonlight, silver tech. So these are all different themes. It's not necessary for you to copy everything. So what you can do is basically you should be able to work with any specific theme. So you just need to copy that theme. By default, it puts everything, so you can delete whatever is not required. Similarly, in the scripts folder, it creates a new folder called Kendo. Under that, 2013.1.5. So it may vary depending on what build you have, and then puts all the the JavaScript files that are required. Now again, you see a lot of files here. We do have kendo.all.min.js, meaning it contains everything, which is kendo.ui.web, the kendo.ui.dataviz, and then kendo mobile. So you don't need, I would say, like, we don't need to put all this kendo.all.min or anything. The only required file is kendo.web.min.js. That is required only, that contains only the web related stuff. So that is the only thing that is required for you to work with. So it's depending on your scenario. What you can do is you can remove everything, but just keep the kendo.web.min.js and then reference that. So that's pretty much what it does. And then the next thing it's going to go and then do is, in the web.config, it's going to go and then add a couple of things. In the pages namespace section, it's going to go and then add this namespace kendo.mvc.ui, so that all the pages get this namespace, and then you will be able to kind of instantiate the work with the MVC wrappers, Kendo UI MVC wrappers. For the demo purpose, what I've done is I've gone ahead and then added a entity framework. If I look at the open model, so I've created a open access ORM. I'm using open access ORM to create a data model. I've connected to AdventureWorks database that is there on my system, and then created this model out of it. So this is what you're seeing now. ADV works entities model.rlink. So this is basically nothing but it's giving me the data model. These are the data model for the AdventureWorks that I've created. Apart from that, I've also created a couple of model objects that I would be requiring. Like, I just created a product model, which is cut down version of all the properties that I have. Also, I have this model known as top grosser model, which is nothing but the product name and the sales amount. I also created top sellers model, which is nothing but it has a product name and the total sales it has done in terms of the numbers. Now, in the controller, so in the home controller, what I have done is I've created a couple of data methods. For example, as remember I was showing you the complete what we are building. So in there we had a categories drop down, we had a subcategories drop down. So all I'm doing is I've created a methods like get categories, get subcategories. For the subcategories, I'm going to be passing category ID. So if there's a category ID, it will return me subcategories based on that. Otherwise, it will return me all the subcategories. And then, remember we had a grid. A grid needs to get the products, needs to show the product. So again, I'm creating another action method called get products, which returns a JSON result. It is looking for category ID and subcategory ID. If category ID is provided, it's going to just give out all the products belonging to that category. If subcategory is provided, it's going to give out based on category and subcategory. And of course, I'm returning a JSON. And then remember, we had two graphs coming up, and then basically the top grosser, all I've done is I've created a stored procedure. It's known as top grossers by category. So it's a simple stored procedure where I just go and then do a group by and then sum the total amount and then order by the category or all those stuff. So basically, I'm using the ORMs, the open access, the methodology, which is to we just use the stored procedure. We just go and execute the stored procedure, and then we have this concept of translate, wherein it takes the data reader and then translates into this particular model type. So it automatically does the conversion and then gives me the list. So similarly, I have a method get top sellers by category. Again, it executes a stored procedure and then translates that into top sellers model. So we're going to be using all these methods, the action methods, to actually bind on the front end and the UI. So notice that every action method that I've written is actually returning a JSON. That is because Kendo UI works in an Ajax manner. That is, it's going to do Ajax calls instead of complete post back of the page. We'll be just bringing the chunks of the data and then filtering, painting the portions of the UI. Having set my data, now let's start working on the UI one by one. So here we have the index.chhtml of the home controller. Basically here what I've done is I've kept a bare minimum markup just in the interest of the time. As you can see, I have a location for categories. I have a I've already put up a div for the subcategories. This is the place where we'll be showing the grid, and here is the position location to show up the top grossers graph, the chart, and then here's a top sellers position to show the top sellers chart. Now let's go ahead and then start creating the controls one by one. First we need the drop down list to show the categories. So what we'll do is we'll create the HTML, and then notice that we'll start getting the IntelliSense, like we got the Kendo, and then we can say okay Kendo dot, and then it will start showing you all the the MVC wrappers that are available. So these are all the wrappers that are available for you to work with. So now I need a drop down list, so I'm going to say drop down list. Notice that it auto completes, and then now I'm going to start chaining. Basically I talked about fluent interface, so this is what it means. So I just say dot name, I will say this is K categories. Now once name is mandatory, without the name it will throw up an error because each control needs to have a name. Then since this is a drop down list, I want to set up what is the field or the property in the data source which should be read to show the text on the UI. So I'm going to say like there is a name property in the data source, bind the data text field to that. Similarly, the data value field should be bound to an ID property on the data source. Once we are given that, we can put up an options label, meaning this is nothing but the HTML5 placeholder mechanism, wherein you can give a small hint to the user what he has to do in this particular thing. So I'll just say select a category as the options. Now here's the interesting thing. Now I need to set up the data. I need to read data to show in the drop down list. In order to show the items, I need to read the data from somewhere. So this is how we set up the source. Let's create a lambda expression here to set up the source. So I'm going to say source, and then we have a mechanism wherein source can have read. You can do a read, you can do all the other things. So I'm saying read, and then again we need to create a lambda expression, which is nothing but just to say that what is the action that I should be reading. So I'll just say read dot action. Remember, we have created an action called get categories. So all I have to do is I have to say get categories is the action on the home controller that I want you to read. That's it. So with this, what happens is we now just created a drop-down list. The drop-down list, what it does is on the client side creates the control, and then it knows that there is an action that it has to read to get the data, and it will read the data asynchronously. So using the Ajax, basically it will do an Ajax call to get categories. The get categories is returning a JSON. It knows that there's a name property, there's an ID property, and then it will just bind. So let me run this, and then we'll see the output. Now I'm going to run this application. So let's see how it comes up now on the UI. So I'm just running it in the Internet Explorer now. It's doing a build. Build has succeeded, so it's going to launch the IE now. So what we should see is basically we just created one drop-down list. So we should see the label categories and then a drop-down list being created, and the drop-down list will actually go read the data from the get categories action method in on the home controller and then show the values filled up in the drop-down. So as you can see, the page is getting created. As you can see, the page comes up and then you see the categories drop down and then you see a spinning thing going on. So that's because this is a Kendo UI drop down list, and since we set up the data source to read from that action method, it's automatically doing an Ajax get, and then there you see, now we see the options label which is select a category. Now when I click on drop down, you will see bikes, components, clothing, accessories coming up. This is because it automatically went ahead, did a Ajax get of the get categories method, and the method returned 4 items, and then here you see it's being bound. So this is a good start now. So we'll see how we can do the other things. Next, what we want to do is we want to put up subcategories, but we don't want the subcategories drop down to be able to be accessed until unless a user has selected a category, and then also we need to get the subcategories belonging to that selected category. So we're going to see how to do this using Kendo UI. This is basically normally termed as cascading a dropdown. So we'll see how easy it is to do this cascading using Kendo UI dropdown. So here we are back in the index.cs HTML of the home controller. So here what we need to do is we need to create a drop-down list, call it as a K subcategories maybe, and then only thing we need to take care is we don't want this to be accessed before categories drop down, like meaning, so this should be disabled until unless a user has selected this categories drop down list. And then once a value from the categories drop down list is selected, we want the subcategories to be filled up with only those categories which belong to the selected category. So we're going to see how to do this now. I start out with the normal HTML, and then I'll say like HTML.kendo, and then we have to say again drop down list. So next we'll give it a name. So I'm going to name this as, I will say this is K subcategories. Remember, we need to provide the data text field. So similar to previous example, I will have the same properties here. So my data text field will be a name property. My data value field will be the ID property, and of course I will also put the options label, and I call it select a subcategory. Now remember I talked about we don't want this to be enabled by default, so I will say by default this should not be enabled, and also I don't want this to go ahead and then auto bind, meaning by default all Kendo UI controls, when they have a data source, they will go and then trigger the data source and say, hey, go read, because I am being created now. So we don't want that to happen for this drop down list, because we want to cascade from the categories. So I'll say I want this to cascade from, we just have to provide the ID of the parent drop down list. In this case it is actually K categories. So that's pretty much. And then we need to tell, okay, what is the data source for this guy. So similar syntax, we're going to set up the data source. We'll create a lambda expression wherein we'll set the read action, all those stuff, but we'll do an extra piece of work and then I'll explain that. So So I want to read, and in the read again I'll create a lambda expression, and then here what I'm going to say is read dot action. So the action that I want to read is get subcategories. And where can I find this? This is on the home controller. Then remember, a subcategory needs a category ID to be filtered. So we need to pass an additional data. The additional data is nothing but what will be the category ID. So I'm going to show you that now in a second. So the way we pass additional data for any requests, like read URL is nothing but just do a read.data. So meaning the read has the data method, and then I just have to give the JavaScript function name, which will be passing the additional data. So now the next question is, okay, where is this JavaScript function name? So let's go ahead and then create this JavaScript function name. I'm going to open up my script tag, and then I will say I want to create a function known as additional data, and then what I will do in this particular function is I have to first go and get the categories drop down list. So this is how you do it. So I'm returning a JSON kind of an object, a JavaScript object, which contains a property known as category ID, because my controller action method called get subcategories is expecting an integer value, and the property, the variable name is category ID. So this variable name and then what you're expecting on the action method parameter name should be the same. Now here's an interesting thing I'm doing. I know there is a control, or there's an element on the DOM known as kcategories. So I'm just using jQuery to grab that, and then I'm saying, hey, go ahead and then convert this into Kendo dropdown list. So this is the way you will convert any element if it is it's a Kendo UI control. This is the way you can actually grab it. You can actually use it at runtime using JavaScript. So all you need to do is get the element using jQuery and then just say dot data Kendo dropdown list. So now I have, once this line is done, I have the full object with me, the Kendo dropdown list object with me. We support a value methods which will give the currently selected value. So I'm just saying, go ahead, look at the k categories dropdown list, get me the value, and then that's the category ID. So this is the additional data we will pass, and this will automatically now go ahead and then do everything for us. We don't have to do anything. When the first time when the page loads, you will see that the subcategories drop down list will be disabled. It will get enabled, and it will go and then read the data only when I change something in the categories drop down. So let's go ahead and then run this and then see what happens. As you can see here, the page is loaded, and then you can see, like, the select subcategories grayed out because it's not enabled, and that is because we told it to told so. And the categories drop down is going ahead and then kind of loading the data. Now it has loaded the data. See, I can actually go and then open up the drop down list of the categories, but I cannot do anything on the subcategories. That is because we said cascade from categories. So keep a look at the categories drop down and the subcategories drop down. Now I'm going to go ahead and then click on bikes. You can see now the subcategories, it went ahead, brought all the subcategories for that, and then it has got the data. So this is how you can do a cascading. There's another interesting thing that we missed out. So if you see here, it is only bringing only one item. So that's because it doesn't know that what is happening on the server side. So only thing we need to do is we have to pretty much, in the data source, we just have to go ahead and say, hey, you know what, the filtering will happen on the server side, so you don't have to worry about it. So just go ahead and then get everything. So I can come back here and then say server filtering. So we don't need a semicolon there. So server filtering, and then you have to say true, so that by default all our controls, what they do is, if there's no server filtering set, they try to do the filter on the client side. So in this case, I want the filtering to be done on the server side. So what I will do is, now I will come back and then let me refresh the page. So you will see, like, the first time you'll see the subcategories again dimmed out because it's not cascaded yet, so it's grayed out. Now I'm going to go and then select the bikes. Now this is going and then getting everything. So now you can see like the mountain bike, road bike, touring bikes. So let's go ahead and select some of the things. You will see like it's did a spinning thing. That's because it's going to the server. As you can see, this is the subcategories under the components. So this is how easy it is to do a cascading using Kendo UI controls. We didn't do much except some of the configuration. So take a look at the code that we have just written. This is not like 10 lines of code. This is rather one call wherein we are using the Fluent interface with chaining, and then that's it. So and then the cascading is as easy as to say, hey, cascade from this, and then I'm passing the additional data, and then I say, hey, you don't do anything, the filtering will be done on the server side. So it just passes the category ID to the server, and then we get the filtered data back, and then the drop down list just bounce it. Okay, now next thing that we need to do is we need to show a grid here in this location. This grid, the way the data it's going to work is when the page loads, what I'm going to do is I'm going to on change of the categories, let's say user goes ahead and then clicks on a particular category. So I would like to actually show a grid here, and then the grid should actually get the data based on whether a category is selected and a subcategory is selected. If subcategory is not selected, it will show all products under a particular category. If a subcategory is selected, so what it will do is it will filter based on category and subcategory and then show the data. So now let's try to put a grid here. So putting a grid is simple. All we need to do is this familiar syntax of html.kendo.grid. Now, once we say grid, there's one more thing that we need to do, and that is we need to actually go and then provide a model. So we're just saying that this grid is going to be working upon this particular model, and this model is available in a namespace. Let me put the namespace. So this is available in this namespace. Now I'm going to come back to the grid. Then I will say like this is a product So as you can see, I'm saying like this grid is now going to work on the product light model. So all our controls need a name, so I'm going to say the name of this grid is nothing but K grid or K products, and then I'll just set some scrolling things, like I just want to make sure that it doesn't take the full space. So I'm going to just say I want the height to be 150, and then I will say this is pageable. So this is another thing. If you want to enable paging, so that's all you have to do. You just have to say paging, and then again, I don't want this to bind by default. So I will say auto bind false, meaning I will explicitly go ahead and then ask you to read the data. So now we need to provide the data source. So what we will do is we will create a lambda again. Let me say this is, and then here's interesting things. Now I'm saying, hey, I want you to go ahead and then read the data in Ajax manner, meaning you should do an Ajax get when you're reading. So, and then I'm saying I want a page size of 5, so that I can just show it in a small space. And then I have a read method here. So this again takes a lambda. So you just have to say like read the action. So the syntax are pretty much similar whatever we have done. So it's again, it takes an action. So in my case, The action is nothing but I have an action called as get products, and then it's on the home controller. And then remember we talked about, so basically when the this particular call goes out, like get products, we need to know what was the category and then what was the subcategories selected. So what I will do is I'll pass additional data. So basically I will say this is product additional data. So remember from the previous example what we did, this is nothing but a JavaScript function name. So now I'm going to go and then create this function. So basically this function is going to be like this. So in the product additional data, what we're going to do is, we know there are two drop down list. One is the category ID and another one is the subcategory ID. So I'm going to just go ahead and say, hey, get me the categories drop down list selected value, get me the subcategories drop down list selected value. So on my server side, I look at whether any one of them is empty, and then if there is empty, I don't put them to the where clause. Otherwise, I will say where category ID is this and where subcategory ID is so and so. So that's how the products data will come. So let's go over this once again. We created a Kendo grid. We said this grid is actually working based on this model. Remember, I've not given any columns. So basically this model, what are the public properties available in this model? The grid will automatically enumerate through them and then create that many columns. So now I said name, scrollable, pageable, auto bind, data source. I've said I read through the Ajax manner. Page size is 5. Read from this action method on this controller, and then I want to pass an additional data. So we have given an additional data. So let's build this and then see what happens now. So as you can see, the page loads, and we have a neat looking grid on the page. So basically it shows product ID, name, product number, color, standard cost, and list price, because there are the properties available in the product model. Now let's go ahead and then try to change a categories. Well, I change the categories, the subcategory changes, but even if I can select a subcategory, but the grid is not getting the data. That's because we never bound the grid to get the data. What we have defined is a grid with the data source, but we have to tell the data source to go and then read it. So let's try to see how to do that. So we're back again in the index.cs HTML. Remember, on changing of the categories, we wanted the data to be bound, but that was not happening. So what we will do is we'll listen to an event on the client side. In the drop-down list, we have concept of events. It's again a lambda expression that you can give, and then we'll say events on the change event. Remember, this is not the server-side events; these are client-side events. So you will need to provide a JavaScript function name. So I'm saying on change of the categories, I want to execute a JavaScript function called as on category change. So let's go ahead and then create a function on category change. So here what we want to do is, we know that we have a products data, so we have a products grid. Remember, I gave it the name of K products. So I'm saying, hey, go and then grab this element called K products. From there, I want the Kendo grid object, and then the Kendo grid object has a data source. I'm just gonna make, and then I'm just gonna go and then say, hey, data source, go and then read. So once we do this, what happens is, remember the definition of the data source. We have said go ahead and then read data from get products action method on the home controller, but also take this additional data when you're going and then reading. The additional data is nothing but the category ID and subcategory ID that we pass. So now let me save the changes, and then let's go and then see what happens on the UI. So let me go ahead and then build this and then run this. So our page loads, and then you see the categories being loaded now. Subcategories I cannot select. Now remember what we did. We have put a change event handler for the categories. So on change of a category here, we should see the products getting filled up. You will see that the grid starts to go and read the data for us. So keep looking at the grid now. I'm going to press on bikes now. You will see this spinning thing going on. You see this? it has already, the grid has already gone ahead and then got the data based on the product ID, I mean the category, which is bikes. So now since I selected a category, the subcategory is available. So I want to see all touring bikes. Oh, I selected the touring bikes, but the data is not getting reflected, and it doesn't show the bikes under the subcategory called touring bikes. Well, the problem is we never handled the change event of the subcategories. So let's go ahead and then do the change event handling of the subcategories in the code. So here's I'm back in the index.chhtml. So this is the case subcategories, the definition. So here what we'll do is we'll again go back and then do what we did for the categories change. So we will say events, and then we will say e dot change, and we will say on subcategory change. Remember, this is a JavaScript function, so we will need to write the JavaScript now. It's pretty much similar to what the category change is, so we can refactor that, create a common function which does this. But for the sake of the demo, I'm just going ahead creating two functions here, and pretty much they will do the same stuff, that is to go ahead and then read the data back. So now when I change a subcategory, and then when I change a subcategory, it's going to go issue a read to the grid again, but it now at this time it will get both category ID and subcategory ID, and the data will get filtered based on both of them. So let's go ahead and then save this and run this and see what happens. Here you see the page coming up, the categories getting loaded, the product grids is empty, subcategories I cannot select. So let's wait for the categories to load. Once the category loads, I'll just go and then select maybe the bikes again. So now this time when I select bikes, it's going to go and get all the data based on the category called bikes. Now keep a look on this. I'm going to click on touring bikes. Did you notice, when I select the touring bikes, the grid has gone ahead and then, filtered based on the subcategory. So basically, the category is bike, subcategory is touring bikes, and then it has got me around 22 items. And notice this paging, I haven't done anything, any code at all. So basically, all the things is done based on our server-side things. So it's doing an Ajax-based paging now. It's gonna go and then get me the first page, get me the third page, everything. So this is how you can pretty much do all this filtering. So now I can go and then say, hey, show me accessories. So you will see like none of the accessories are coming up. So I can see. So if I go and then do this here, so you see that components handlebar. So you'll see all the things related to this is coming. So I have only one chains, derailleur, and then so you get the point now. So basically this is how we did the filtering. Just loaded the categories, loaded the subcategories, and then whenever you change any one of these, we are just passing an additional data to the action method, which gives us the products, which is the category ID and subcategory ID. The data gets filtered, the grid automatically comes. But did you notice the amount of code that we had to write? That's just only this much, this is all, and then it does everything for us. Of course, I have to show the controller at this point of time because there's one piece of information that I have to pass on. So what we have done is, this is all possible because we have a special method known as toDataSource result. So this is an extension method. So all it does is it can go ahead and then convert this whole list that you give into a mechanism that the grid can understand. Grid can do the paging, grid can do the sorting, grid can do the filtering, grouping, everything. So this extension method has all the information required for the grid to understand how it needs to page, or what are the things it has to do now for the paging, for the grouping, filtering, everything. Look at the parameter here. Apart from category ID and subcategory ID, the grid also passes additional amount of information, like a metadata, like how many pages are there in a page, how many rows are there in a page, basically the number of records per page, and then what page is being requested, like did the user click on 5th page, did the user click on 4th page, is there a filter being applied, is there a sorting being applied, if yes, what's the column, everything is gonna be here model binder to this particular request. If you look at my method, all I'm doing is I'm just going and then doing products.select, and then I'm just projecting that into the product light model. I got the list, and then finally when I'm ready to send it back, I'm just doing to data source result, and then the JSON request behavior is allow get. So this is how we are able to do the paging without writing a single line of code. If you see here, I just said pageable, that's all I've done, but I haven't handled any of the paging, because that's because Kendo UI grid is capable of handling the paging on its own. Only thing you need to do is provide the data in a way it can understand, and then that's it, you're all set. Now the only piece remaining is, remember the chart that I was talking about in order to show. So basically what we want to do is we want to put two charts here, one for the grocers and another for the top sellers, and then whenever there's a category change, we want to go ahead and then load the chart again. So let me go and then first create a chart here. So I already have the chart code in my clipboard. In the interest of the time, I'm just going to just copy paste now. So if you see here, what I've done is I have a top grosser model. So I'm saying, hey chart, you're working based on this model. So I've given a name, the chart area. I've just given some colors for the chart area. I've set the height of the chart. Again, I've said auto bind is false because I don't want it to go and then read the data, whereas I will issue the read when a category changes. And what is the data source? Data source is again the same, source.read, from where there's a get top grosses by category method on the home controller. Yes, I will pass an additional data, which is the category ID, which is selected. Now, in order to provide the series, we have a series method, and then it's again a lambda, and I say I want a bar series, and the y-axis should be bound to the sales amount, and it should have a name called sales in amount. The category axis is basically the product name. Remember, in the top grocers model, what we had defined was product name, and then let me just go to the class file. So this has the product name and the sales amount. So I want the product name coming on my x-axis, sales amount coming on my y-axis. So that's what I've said, the category axis should be the product name, the y-axis should be the sales amount. I've set some other configurations, on the value axis, I want a major unit at 200,000. I want to format it like a currency. I'm just doing the tooltip like this. The category axis is coming up like that. I want to show a tooltip. Now, if I just run this, you'll see an empty graph. Instead, what we will do is we're going to go to the on change of category. Remember, we have on category change. So here what we will do is we know we have a chart called kchart1. So on category change, I want the grid to be refreshed, and then I also want the chart to be refreshed. Remember, chart1.data.kendo chart.data source.read. So once we do this, what will happen when we change the category is the grid gets its data, and then the top grocers for that category will be charted out. So let's build this and then run this and see how it comes up. Here you see the page coming up. So in the bottom you'll see a graph coming out here. So let the categories load. I'm just going to go and then select a category, and then we should see the top grocers chart being charted out. That's because on change of the categories, what we have said is we want to go and then refresh the grid source and refresh the chart source. So now I'm going to go and then say this, and then you can see at the bottom, we'll start seeing the chart coming up. So as you can see here, the chart is coming up, and then of course it's a small area where I put the chart. So it's showing like mountain 200, black 38 is having around 4,400,000 in sales amount. It's a currency now. So similarly, this is the top grosser. So what should we do for the top sellers? Let's go ahead and then do the same thing. I'll pretty much copy everything as is. Only thing that I need to change is how I read the data. Otherwise, pretty much everything else is the same. So for the top sellers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy paste, and I'm going to call this as chart 2, and instead of get top grocers, it's going to be top sellers by category, and then instead of sales in amount, this is now sales in numbers. And that's it. That's pretty much what we should get, like it's going to go and then read the top sellers by category in terms of numbers on the home controller, and I'm passing an additional data which is nothing but the selected category ID. So now let me build this and then run this. We'll see how the chart comes up. So is the page coming up? So you will see in the bottom, two graphs being shown, but they will have no records as of now because we are not refreshed it. So if you want, you can actually do a little bit of JavaScript magic, wherein you make the graphs invisible at the starting, and then only when the user selects a particular category, you can actually bring show the graph. So now you'll see, like both the graphs will start coming up now. Well, as you can see, the second graph is not getting refreshed. That is because I think I made a mistake, and that mistake is we never refresh the second graph. So what we need to do is go to the on category change. Remember, we have this chart 1. So similarly, we just have to come back here and then say k chart 2, and that is a Kendo chart, and then data source.read. That's it. So now let's rerun this again. Again, we have the page coming up, the categories is getting loaded. So let me go and then select a category. Let me say bikes. And there you go. So we have as you can see here, when I change my categories, you will see both the grid and both the charts getting recreated, the chart getting refreshed. So I can just go ahead and then click on any other categories. You will see like the grid gets loaded, the top grosses, the top seller get loaded. So let's go over the code again. Basically, for the second, we had to change. The code is pretty much similar than the first chart that we did, but except the model that it's going to work on is known as top seller model, and also the category axis will get a different property now. So instead of the sales amount, this is now total sales, and then a couple of other things that needs to be changed. The action method, and then the additional data is the same. So there you go. So now if I go back and then pretty much refresh the page to just for the last time, just to go through each things. So page loads, we have the categories coming up. Look at how fast it is. Now it has already come, so I can click on bikes. So now the grid will show me all the bikes because I have not selected any subcategories. Now the top grosses for this categories are Mountain 200 black. The top seller in this category is Mountain 200 black 38 again. So if I go and then change the mountain bikes, you will see only the grid getting changed. So I can say touring bikes. Now I can go and then change the category. Once you change the category, the graph gets recreated. Even you can see that even the grid gets recreated. The data for the grid is refreshed, the chart is refreshed, both the charts are refreshed. So this was a quick and easy way to show you how easily you can develop things like this using Kendo UI. So that was the demo. We saw some action. We wanted to showcase to you how easy it is to build things in ASP.NET MVC with Kendo UI controls. Just for a moment, just take a guess that if you don't have controls like this, how would you do all these things that I showed you, like cascading the drop down, the grid getting created, the two graphs being charted. So a lot of code has to be written, which is like you have to write a lot of code. Instead, with Kendo UI MVC wrappers, it's so easy. It's all you're doing is configuring things. You're not writing code, rather you're configuring how Kendo UI widgets have to work. So that's pretty much it for this particular webinar. Thank you very much for being with us. If you have any further questions, so here's my coordinates: lohit.nagaraj@telric.com. If you're on Twitter, you can tweet to me at handle Kashyapa. So don't forget, we will be announcing two winners for the .NET Ninja T-shirt. So that will be announced on our blog post. We will be writing a recap blog post on teleric.helper.net. So we request you to maybe come back, take a look at the website next week. We should be having the slide decks, the video recording of this particular webinar, and also we'll have all the Q&A being answered in a recap blog post, and there we'll announce two winners for the .NET Ninja T-shirt. So thank you once again for being with us, and we hope you will join us again. Thank you.